My name is Claire Monroe. I'm 28 years old, and I never thought I'd become the eye of a legal hurricane over a house filled with books, old biscuit tins, and one woman's legacy. It all started with a text message I wasn't supposed to see. Tomorrow at Birch's, 2 p.m. Mom says, "Don't tell Claire." That was it. Just one sentence in the middle of dinner prep, sent by my cousin Madison and clearly meant for a different group thread. I read it 3 times. The words didn't make sense. Birch? As in Stanley Birch, Grandma Maggie's longtime estate attorney? And don't tell me? My phone buzzed again. Ignore that. Wrong thread. No explanation, no apology, just that. I stared at my phone, frozen. One hand still wrapped around the wooden spoon I'd been using to stir tomato soup. They were reading Grandma's will, and I wasn't invited. Before I continue my story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. My family had always known how to perform closeness without actually being close. Holiday dinners, white tablecloths, monogrammed stockings hung on the mantel. My Aunt Deborah saw to it all. Photos arranged by height and hair color, matching napkin rings, handwritten place cards. The illusion was perfect. But underneath, it was all rotten. Because if you looked too long, you'd see how they cut people out with silence, how every favor came with a price, and how if you weren't useful, you weren't seen. My dad, Daniel, was Maggie's youngest, the quiet one, the one who left the family business to teach English at the local high school. He married my mom, Carolyn, a nurse with a soft voice and tired eyes. We lived modestly, small apartment, no trust fund, no golf club membership. But we were happy. Until the day Dad collapsed from an aneurysm when I was 12. Just like that, everything cracked. Mom worked nights, bills piled up, and out of the blue, Grandma Maggie stepped in like a force of nature. "She'll live with me part of the week," she told everyone, matter of fact, as if she'd already drawn up the schedule. "Claire needs steadiness. She'll get it here." And I did. Her old Charleston house became a second home to me. The smell of lemon polish and gardenias, the hiss of her kettle on Sunday mornings. Her hands always smelled faintly of lavender and flower. I started calling her after school just to talk. She listened. She really listened. Even when I was older, when I chose hospice care as my nursing specialty, and my family called it a waste of potential, Grandma Maggie just nodded. She said, "Take strength to stay when people are dying. Anyone can show up when it's easy." The Caldwells never liked how close we were. Uncle Walter, Aunt Deborah, their kids, Madison and Tyler, they saw Grandma as the matriarch of an empire. I saw her as a woman who still cried when she watched old documentaries about the Dust Bowl. I knew they'd start circling after her funeral, but I never imagined they'd try to erase me from the reading of her will. That night, I sat at my tiny kitchen table, soup gone cold, phone screen glowing. I could have let it go, pretended I didn't see. But Maggie once told me, silence is how bullies win. So I made a decision. I was going. I ironed my navy dress, her favorite one on me, packed the letter she wrote me last Christmas in my purse, just in case I needed proof that I belonged. And the next day, I walked into Birch and Weller's law office, heart pounding, hands shaking. What happened next would shatter every illusion they ever built. The moment I stepped into Birch and Weller's waiting room, every eye in the room turned to me like I was an intruder. Aunt Deborah froze mid-sentence. Madison's hand clutched her phone tighter. Uncle Walter gave me a look I hadn't seen since the lake house fight. That tight-lipped glare that says, "You don't belong here." I said nothing, just sat near the window like I had every right to be there. Because I did. I thought back to those Sundays in Grandma Maggie's garden, that tiny patch of Eden behind her Charleston house, wrought iron benches, hydrangeas the size of dinner plates. She always wore wide-brimmed sun hats and these ridiculous, oversized gloves that made her look like a beekeeper, even when she was just pruning roses. "Come smell this one, Claire. Not everything beautiful wants attention." She taught me that the best things, the truest things, grow quietly. Not loud, not polished, not always appreciated. We'd sit for hours, talking about everything from her favorite Maya Angelou poem to the reason she never remarried. "Too many men want a woman they can explain away," she'd say, sipping sweet tea. "I prefer a life I don't need to justify." She never treated me like a grandchild out of obligation. I wasn't a second-string replacement after my dad died. I was her person, and she was mine. But you wouldn't know that from how the rest of the family acted. Take the lake house, for example. It was Maggie's sanctuary, a quiet, slightly run-down A-frame on Lake Jocassee, where she went every summer since childhood. The floors creaked and the plumbing groaned, but the sunsets were perfect. We once sat on the porch eating watermelon and listening to Nina Simone. I was 16. It was the first time she let me drive her car. She looked at me and said, "This is the version of you I love best. Hair a mess, skin sunburned, and free." I didn't know what she meant then, but I do now. That summer was the last time we had real peace, before Uncle Walter started sniffing around, pushing her to consolidate assets. That's what he called it, consolidate. Like her memories could be itemized on a spreadsheet. It started with small things, suggesting she sell her antique books, cash out some old bonds. Then came the lake house proposal. They ambushed her with a realtor and a pitch deck during what was supposed to be a care meeting. I was there. I watched Maggie's face go still, the way it did when she was disappointed but trying not to show it. She just said, "No, the cabin stays." That didn't go over well. After the meeting, Uncle Walter pulled me aside. "You're making this harder for everyone. She listens to you, maybe too much." And I replied, "Maybe she should." Back in the waiting room, the door opened. Stanley Birch poked his head out. "Claire Monroe?" he asked, and then glanced at the Caldwells. "Yes, you are supposed to be here." That one sentence was all I needed. I stood, walked past the stunned faces of my relatives, and followed Mr. Birch into the conference room where my grandmother's voice, written and sealed, was waiting to speak one last time. The conference room smelled like cedar wood and old leather, a place where decisions stuck. There were 12 chairs, but only 8 of us. My family ranged on one side like a firing squad. I took the seat nearest the window. My hands trembled under the table. Madison was whispering to Tyler, who kept glancing at me with an expression that was almost pity? No, it was worse than that. It was smugness with a hint of fear, as if he knew something I didn't, but wasn't sure it would hold up. Deborah, all pearls and Botox, cleared her throat. "Mr. Birch, I feel I should clarify. Claire wasn't included because most matters have already been sorted." Sorted. They always used tidy words to cover messy deeds. Like that day at the lake house, they called it a family discussion, just to talk logistics about summer care, they said. But when I walked in, there was a man in a slim-fit blazer and polished shoes, flipping through laminated pages about market comps and seasonal volatility. Grandma Maggie was in her floral house dress, sipping coffee on the porch, the kind of day she usually spent doing crosswords and humming Patsy Cline. When I asked what was going on, she gave me a look that said, "Play along," but her fingers were tapping against her mug. Walter stood like a CEO addressing shareholders. "We're considering putting the lake property on the market. It's underused. Maintenance costs have increased by 18% this year alone." He sounded rehearsed, like this pitch had been practiced. Deborah chimed in with a saccharine smile. "Mother understands. At her age, she can't really enjoy it anymore." But I knew the truth. Just the week before, Grandma had told me, "This might be my last summer up there. I want to sit by the dock one more time." So I said that, right there, in front of everyone. She told me she wants to go back. Silence. The kind of silence that doesn't hum, it throbs. Maggie, to her credit, didn't flinch. "I did. I do." The realtor excused himself quickly. Deborah turned crimson. And Walter, he stared at me like I'd just derailed a billion-dollar merger. After everyone left that day, he cornered me in the kitchen. His voice was low, lethal. "You don't get it, do you? You think being her little favorite means something in the real world?" I said nothing. He leaned in, breath hot with whiskey. "Your daddy was a sentimental fool, died broke and forgotten, and you're just like him." That stayed with me. Not because I believed him, but because it told me exactly who he was. Now in this room, he looked at me like I was still that naive little girl playing in Maggie's garden, but I wasn't. Mr. Birch opened a thick file. "Before we begin, I must stress, nothing should have been divided yet. No items removed. This reading is the formal execution of Margaret Whitmore's final will." Aunt Deborah's mouth opened, closed. Mr. Birch looked around, then looked at me. "And as for why Claire is here," he said, sliding out a document with deliberate care, "her name is the only one in the will." Time fractured. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, glass shattered. Madison had dropped her water, Tyler swore under his breath, Deborah made a choking sound, and Walter surged forward like he might grab the will right off the table. "What the hell are you talking about?" he growled. Mr. Birch didn't blink. Everything was left to Claire Monroe. The house, the lake cabin, the investment accounts. All of it. That moment, it wasn't satisfaction. It was something deeper. Validation. Because Maggie hadn't just seen me, she'd chosen me. The first time they locked me out, it was subtle. Christmas Eve. I texted Deborah, asking what time dinner was starting. No reply. Then came a vague message from Madison. "We're keeping it small this year, just immediate family. Grandma's resting." I remember staring at those words like they were a riddle. Immediate family? Grandma was my immediate family. I was the only one who visited her every single week, who brought her fresh cornbread and that soft blue shawl she loved, who sat by her bed when her legs went numb and she couldn't feel her fingers. I baked cookies anyway, the ones she used to make when I was little. Brown sugar, nutmeg, and just a dash of black pepper. Our secret. I boxed them with a tin of herbal tea, a cashmere scarf, and a photo album I'd made of the lake house through the years.
Maria, her health aide, promised she'd give it to her. She'll light up. She always does when you're mentioned. I waited for a thank you, a call, a text. Nothing came. Later, I found out the whole family had gathered without me. Madison posted a photo of them toasting champagne beside the massive fireplace in Walter's house. Grandma sat in the corner, bundled in that scarf I'd given her. Her face was pinched, her eyes confused. She didn't even know I hadn't been invited. After that, the exclusions got bolder. Easter brunch happened at Deborah's, I wasn't told. A 4th of July barbecue, no invite. When I tried visiting on a Tuesday like usual, I found a note on the door. "Claire, please come Sundays only, 2 to 4 p.m. Too many visitors are tiring her." But every Sunday, someone else would accidentally show up during my window. Tyler dropping something off, Deborah bringing a casserole, Madison showing up for 5 minutes with her loud perfume and louder complaints. I couldn't get 5 minutes alone. Even Maria started looking nervous when I'd arrive. "Mrs. Caldwell says shorter visits are better. But Grandma always wants me to stay." Maria just bit her lip. "I know." I started bringing sandwiches and iced tea. We'd eat on the porch, our secret picnic. Sometimes she'd nod off while I read to her. Other times she'd tell me stories from her childhood. How her own mother, Lillian, had sewn her first dress. How her father used to whistle off-key but always got the words right. How Walter once got caught stealing $1 from her purse and blamed it on the cleaning lady. I asked her if she remembered telling me she wanted to go to the lake house that summer. "Of course," she said. "Don't let them sell it. That place is part of me." She squeezed my hand then, stronger than I expected. "I see more than they think. I may be old, but I'm not stupid. And soon, I'll make it right." I thought she meant spiritually, that she wanted closure before the end. But Grandma Maggie never said things lightly. When she made a promise, she meant it.
When Grandma Maggie passed, I found out from Maria, not the family. It was early morning when she called, voice trembling. "Claire, I'm so sorry. She passed last night in her sleep, peacefully." I didn't speak, just sank under the edge of my bed, blanket bunched under my knees as the sound of birds chirping outside clashed horribly with what I just heard. She was gone. The woman who taught me to roll pie dough and prune hydrangeas, who reminded me I was enough when the world said otherwise. Gone. And I hadn't been there. The funeral was held 4 days later, not at the modest church Grandma used to attend, but at a massive Episcopalian one downtown, chosen for presentation, no doubt. I wasn't consulted. The program listed a single speaker, Walter Caldwell. I arrived alone, wore her favorite brooch, carried a tissue she'd once embroidered with the letter M. When I entered, a volunteer handed me a paper and motioned to the 3rd row, extended family. My name wasn't even on the reserved seating list. I sat behind people who hadn't seen her in 10 years. The service was clean, sanitized. Walter gave an eulogy that mentioned stock portfolios and charitable foundations, as if Maggie were a boardroom figurehead, not a real person. Not once did he mention her garden, or the lake, or how she used to hum old soul songs when she baked. No one talked about the way she made people feel. I clenched my hands in my lap and stared straight ahead. Afterward, there was a polished reception, shrimp cocktail, jazz quartet, everyone in black linen and pearls, trading compliments like business cards. Aunt Deborah caught my eye across the room, her mouth twisted into a practiced smile. "Claire," she said, voice syrupy, "we were just about to call you." Of course they were. She patted my arm like I was some lost niece who'd wandered in off the street. "We're all gathering at Walter's this weekend to discuss arrangements. You should stop by." Arrangements? She meant the estate, the house, the lake cabin, the money. Maggie's life reduced to bullet points and furniture tags. I just nodded. I wasn't ready to fight. Not yet. But 2 days later, that text came in from Madison. "Mom says don't tell Claire." And suddenly,
The picture was crystal clear. They weren't just pushing me aside. They were planning to erase me. I stayed up all night replaying every visit, every story Maggie had told me, every time she'd said, "You're the only one who still sees me." I thought about the letter she'd given me last year, sealed and written in her tiny looping cursive. I hadn't opened it. She'd said, "Not yet. When it feels like everyone's against you, that's when you'll need it." I opened it now. Inside, just one line. "Trust your place. I've already made it clear." The next morning, I ironed that navy dress again, clutched that letter, took a deep breath. They thought they'd cut me out, but Maggie had already drawn the map. All I had to do was follow it. Mr. Birch adjusted his reading glasses, calm as a man lighting a match in a dry forest. "I, Margaret Louise Whitmore, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my final will and testament." The room was silent, except for the slow scratch of a pen someone nervously twirled across paper. Aunt Deborah sat with her arms crossed, lips pressed so tightly together they looked colorless. Uncle Walter leaned back like he owned the oxygen in the room. Madison picked at her nail polish. Tyler looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. I didn't move, just listened, heart thudding against my ribs. After a few pages of legal boilerplate, Mr. Birch shifted his weight and cleared his throat. After careful reflection and deliberate observation of my family over the years, I have decided to leave the entirety of my estate. This includes, but is not limited to, my primary residence in Charleston, my lake property on Jocassee, all investments, heirlooms, and personal belongings to my granddaughter, Claire Elise Monroe. I heard a gasp. Deborah's, I think. Madison muttered, "No fucking way," under her breath. Walter's knuckles went white against the polished table. My name. In every clause. On every line. And then the lawyer added, "Margaret also left a personal letter, addressed to Claire. I've been instructed to deliver it privately. However, in light of the reaction in this room, she has permitted portions to be read aloud at my discretion." He passed the envelope across the table. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I looked across at the people who had tried to shut me out of this moment, and I said quietly, "I'm not here for revenge. I just wanted to hear her voice one last time." Walter laughed, a bitter bark. "She was confused. Claire manipulated her. We all know that." Mr. Birch didn't flinch. Miss Whitmore underwent 3 independent cognitive evaluations over the last 8 months. All declared her mentally sound. She was old, easily swayed. The lawyer opened another folder. She anticipated that claim, which is why she began documenting her estate decisions on video. That shut them up. He clicked a remote, and a screen lowered from the ceiling like it had been waiting. There she was, Grandma Maggie, wearing her favorite blue cardigan, sitting in her sunroom, a fresh orchid behind her. Voice strong, clear. If you're watching this, then you're probably angry. But know this, I saw how each of you behaved when you thought no one was paying attention. She looked into the camera, straight through it, through time, right into us. I chose Claire because she loved me without asking for anything, because she showed up, because she listened. That's it. That's the list. Madison had tears in her eyes now, silent ones streaking down her mascara. Tyler stared at the floor. Walter was already pulling out his phone, texting furiously. "This is a setup," he hissed. Mr. Birch calmly replied, "Everything is timestamped, witnessed, documented. You may contest it, but I assure you, no court will reverse this will." Deborah stood up abruptly. "You'll hear from our lawyer." "I expect I will," Mr. Birch said, unfazed. As they filed out, rage, confusion, disbelief trailing behind them, I sat perfectly still. In front of me, a folded letter with my name in familiar cursive. "My dearest Claire," it began. And as I read, her voice returned in my mind, softer than ever. "You passed every test I never said out loud. You stayed when others vanished. That's love. That's legacy. That's who you are." The next morning, my phone started ringing before sunrise. Unknown numbers, no voicemails, then known ones. Deborah, Walter, Madison. I silenced everything, shoved the phone into a drawer, and went back to bed. 20 minutes later, it buzzed again. And again. By lunch, the voicemails were stacking up like wet laundry. I listened to exactly one. "Claire, it's your Aunt Deborah. You need to reconsider. This is not how family behaves. You're tearing us apart. Call me back." I deleted it without blinking. Then came the messages. Texts, emails, even DMs from extended family I hadn't spoken to in years. "Just wanted to say sorry about the drama, but maybe you could talk to Walter. That portrait above the fireplace was promised to me. Surely you remember that. Be the bigger person, Claire. Give a little. It's what Maggie would want." Was it? Was it what she wanted when she was dying, and I was the only one brushing her hair, filing her nails, reading to her while they sat in air-conditioned country clubs drafting legacy strategies? And then came the posts. Madison went public. Funny how some people weaponize kindness to get what they want. Real family doesn't need a will to remember who mattered. The photo was a shot of her and Grandma Maggie, filtered and brightened, taken the previous Thanksgiving. The caption had 1,000 likes and a comment section that turned into a bonfire of subtweets. I didn't respond, but I read them. I read every backhanded accusation, every passive-aggressive sympathy post. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at a plate of eggs I had no intention of eating, while my throat tightened and my chest clenched like a fist. By day 3, my stomach was in knots. I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart racing, convinced someone was watching the house. They weren't just trying to shame me, they wanted to undo me. And it worked, for a while. Even at the hospice center, things changed. Families I worked with suddenly pulled their loved ones from my care. No explanation, no warning. Then my supervisor called me in. "Claire, I need to ask, is everything okay at home? We've been getting strange calls. One woman said you were using your position to influence your grandmother's estate." I froze. I don't believe it, but it's creating noise. I nodded. "I need a few days. Take the week." When I got home that afternoon, there were 2 envelopes taped to my front door. One was a cease and desist from Walter's lawyer, threatening to contest the will. The other was a handwritten note. "You think you've won. This isn't over. W." I sat on the floor for hours. Didn't cry, didn't scream, just stared at that note until the sun disappeared behind the neighbor's house and shadows swallowed the room. I thought about giving it all back. The house, the lake property,
the accounts, the name that now felt heavier than any inheritance ever should. But then I remembered the video, the way Grandma looked at me through the screen. I chose you because you saw me. I wasn't going to fold. Not after everything. I was going to fight. The safe was tucked behind a stack of winter quilts in the back of Maggie's closet, where the smell of lavender still lingered. I'd never seen it before, or maybe I had but never thought to check. It was painted the same soft cream as the walls, blended in like wallpaper. I tried her birthday. Click. Inside, a worn leather journal, 3 labeled USB drives, and a folded note that simply said, "Use if necessary." It was necessary. I took everything and spread it across her old writing desk, the one with the carved roses along the edges where she used to scribble recipes and grocery lists. My hands shook, but not from fear, from fury, from the quiet kind of rage that only comes after grief has been hijacked by cruelty. The journal came first. Handwritten notes in Maggie's neat looping script, each entry dated, each one short, precise. April 6, Deborah brought lunch, left after 38 minutes, only asked about my health once, seemed distracted, mentioned real estate evaluations again. May 18th, Tyler visited, took photos of the painting in the foyer, found the same photo posted on his LinkedIn banner today. July 22nd, Claire brought blueberries from the farmer's market, stayed 2 hours, talked about hospice patients. I told her about the letters from my father. She listened. Every visit, every gift, every disappearance. Then came the photos. Hundreds of them. She had cataloged nearly every item in the house and at the lake cabin. Jewelry, heirlooms, artwork, furniture, all matched to dates, storage locations, and in some cases, the names of who had asked about them. There was even a spreadsheet on one USB, removed items, estimated value, color-coded with corresponding photos, dates, and cross-referenced visits. It wasn't just thorough, it was meticulous. And then videos, dozens of them, each with a date stamp, location, and short description. She used her iPad, propped up on a bookstand. The lighting wasn't great, but her face was always visible, alert, intentional. In one clip, she addressed Deborah directly. If you're thinking of saying I was confused, remember, I ran a nonprofit for 20 years. Confused people don't manage budgets. I'm forgetful, sure, but I've never forgotten who showed up and who didn't. In another, her voice cracked, but she kept going. Walter wants the lake house sold, says it's a waste. What he doesn't know is I had it appraised last month. It's worth twice what he thinks. But I'd give it away to a stranger before I let him tear it down for a golf condo. That line hit me like a punch. She knew. She'd seen it all. I backed up the drives, made copies of everything, and called Elise Tran, the estate litigator Mr. Birch recommended. She was the kind of woman who didn't smile unless she meant it, and rarely needed to. When I showed her the footage, the documentation, the voice logs, she leaned back, crossed her arms, and smiled. Actually smiled. She said, "This," tapping the screen, "is a legal fortress." She drafted formal return notices, asset freeze requests, and cease and desists that made Deborah's look like kindergarten art projects. "Let them try to fight this," she said, cool as polished glass. "We'll bury them in proof." Then she paused. "You know what the hardest part of these cases is, Claire?" I shook my head. "Most people don't have any receipts." I looked down at the open journal on my lap. I did. I had everyone. It started with a knock on the door just after sunset. I opened it slowly, heart stuttering. No one was there, just a box. Taped shut, no label. I pulled it inside and opened the top. Grandma's sapphire brooch. The one Deborah wore to the gala 2 months before Maggie passed. I'd seen the pictures.
sparkling under the ballroom lights, pinned to a silk shawl like it belonged to her. Now it was back, resting quietly on a bed of tissue paper, as if it had never left Maggie's jewelry drawer. The next morning, more boxes came, shipped this time, neatly stacked on the porch by a delivery service. Each one held an heirloom: the etched crystal punch bowl, the antique clock from the study, a faded quilt stitched by Maggie's mother. No notes, no signatures, just silent, late-stage compliance. Elise had given them 7 days. We were on day 4. She had filed a formal claim with the probate court, listing every missing item, cross-referenced with Maggie's inventory. Over $420,000 in personal property, unaccounted for, presumed misappropriated. Her motion demanded their return or legal escalation. Apparently, the Caldwells had taken her seriously, at least enough to avoid court. One night, I spotted a moving van idling at the curb. Tyler stepped out of it, holding a wrapped canvas. When he saw me watching, he didn't wave, just left it at the foot of the porch, got back in, and drove away. Inside was the painting of the lake at sunset, Grandma's favorite. I stood staring at it for a long time. The thing about winning is it's not always satisfying. Not when it comes covered in dust and regret. Not when it arrives without acknowledgement, without apology. But it was justice, and it mattered. The lawsuit from Walter dropped. Elise's 97-page rebuttal with video clips of Maggie stating her intentions, audio recordings of Walter trying to convince her to streamline her assets, and records of his unreturned loans left his legal team scrambling. The hospice rumors? Stamped out. Elise issued cease and desist letters backed with affidavits from 5 nurses and Maria, the aide, all confirming my consistent presence and care. One nurse's statement read, "Claire was the only family member I saw visiting more than once a week, often brought home-cooked food, stayed for hours. Patient was always noticeably uplifted." When Elise read it aloud, I cried. Not out of sadness, but relief that finally someone had seen what I did, what I wasn't doing for credit or compensation or show. The media coverage eventually fizzled out. Madison's carefully crafted victim narrative lost steam when Elise leaked court documents showing Maggie had begun drafting the will 3 years ago, during a stretch when Claire visited 64 times, and the Caldwells, less than 10 combined. Aunt Deborah sent a single message to Elise's office. "We hope Claire will consider reconciliation in time. We regret misunderstandings." It wasn't an apology, but it was something. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I stood in Maggie's old sunroom, lights spilling across the floors, surrounded by her things slowly making their way home. I placed the brooch back in her velvet-lined drawer, smoothed the quilt across her bed, and for the first time in weeks, I slept without waking up in a panic. Not because everything was okay, but because everything was finally truthful. And that was enough for now. 6 months later, the garden bloomed again. I planted new lavender where the rosemary had overgrown, hung solar lanterns along the fence, soft flickering light that danced at dusk. Maggie's wind chimes still hung by the back door, silver ones shaped like birds. Their notes were gentle, uneven, just like her laugh. The house felt different now, not haunted, honored. like it had breathed out after holding itself together too long. I kept most of her things where they were, but I added touches. New bookshelves filled with hospice memoirs, a sunroom meditation corner with floor cushions, and Maggie's old Afghan. I framed the photo of us baking cookies when I was 15, the one where she's flicking flour at my nose, eyes twinkling like secrets. And I built the foundation, the Margaret Whittemore Legacy Project, a grant fund for palliative care nurses and end-of-life caregivers. No frills, just support, help for the helpers, just like she always wanted. I called Maria first. I can't think of anyone who'd understand it more, I told her. She cried. I visited the lake house too, cleaned it up, took a solo weekend and walked the dock barefoot, just like we used to. There was moss on the wood now, but the water still shimmered the same. I stood there at sunset, holding a mug of tea, watching the light spill across the surface, and whispered, I kept it. The silence that followed felt like an answer, one I didn't need words for. Then, slowly, the edges began to soften. Madison messaged me, not public, not performative, just a short DM. I named my daughter Margaret. I hope that's okay. I said it was. She asked if we could meet, share memories. I agreed. We sat in the same garden where Maggie and I had once sat. Madison brought baby Margaret. She didn't try to justify. She just listened. I used to think she didn't like me, Madison said. But now I realize maybe I didn't give her a chance to. Tyler sent an email later, asking if he could have Grandpa's tackle box from the lake house. Said he remembered going fishing with him once when he was 6. I mailed it. Aunt Deborah sent a Christmas card with only 8 words inside. You've handled this with more grace than I did. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a start. Walter never reached out. Some roots rot too deep to salvage, and that's okay. Forgiveness doesn't mean reunion. Sometimes it means letting go without holding open. The day the probate court officially closed the case, I lit a candle in the sunroom, folded up the last legal document, tucked Maggie's original letter back into its envelope. Then I took out her final note, the one she left for me after the dust had settled. You were never meant to win a war. You were meant to carry a light forward, to show what love looks like when it's not performative. Use the house, use the funds, but most of all, use the freedom to be fully yourself. That's the real legacy. I cried for a long time, not out of pain, but because I finally knew who I was, and I liked her. Have you ever had to hold your ground when no one believed you? Ever fought for someone's memory when the world tried to rewrite it? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. If this story meant something to you, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Because sometimes the inheritance isn't land or money or antiques. It's truth. It's knowing you mattered. It's the strength to carry love into rooms where it was once silenced.